Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. Minimal contact in stadiums shouldn't stop the usual suspects from going down. Gamble responsibly. cwe.net.
Welcome along to this Friday's edition of the Paddy Power Half Hour. It is the last weekend of the Premier League before a pretty crucial international break. The Republic of Ireland getting ready for their Euro 2020 playoff semi-final on Thursday. And I'm sure that the management will be hoping that the players can come through unscathed from this weekend. A lot of big fixtures coming up, including our 2 live games Off the Ball on News Talk this coming Sunday. At 2 p.m, it's the meeting of Arsenal and Sheffield United, where former Republic of Ireland captain Kenny Cunningham will be joining Nathan Murphy on commentary. And then at 4 o'clock, we've got Jose Mourinho going up against another of his former employers when he takes his Tottenham team to Manchester United. Commentating on that one will be Brian Kerr and Stephen Doyle. All that to look forward to. We've also had the draw in the last hour or so for the Europa League group stages. Dundalk have landed themselves a glamour tie in their Group B. They will be taking on the Premier League powerhouses Arsenal. They've also got Molde of Norway and Rapid Vienna in their group. Celtic have been handed a very difficult task, including AC Milan in their group. We'll talk about all that in a moment, and we'll look forward to all those big games in the Premier League coming up this weekend. Joining me, we've got Team 33 host Enda Coll, first of all. Enda, how are you getting on?
Well, what's the crack?
Well, we might talk a little bit about Dundalk off the top here, Enda, because I was at the Aviva Stadium last night, and even though Dundalk probably only played well for maybe 20, 25 minutes of the game, they got a 3-1 victory, which is going to land them a massive windfall, at least €2.9 million. It'll go above that if they get any points in their Europa League group. And now they've landed themselves a very interesting couple of games against Arsenal in Group B of the competition in the draw as well.
Yeah, you introduced it as the Dundalk take on the powerhouses of Arsenal. It's more like Arsenal take on the powerhouses of Irish football in Dundalk. It's a massive fixture from Dundalk. It's such a pity that, first of all, Shamrock Rovers had to take on AC Milan without anybody there, and now Dundalk have to take on Arsenal, which would have drawn a massive crowd to the Aviva Stadium in a couple of months' time. So it's a tough draw. I mean, any draw that Dundalk were going to get in this Europa League was going to be tough. But these are the games that you want. You want these glamour ties that are going to attract fans to watch the games. You want more of an overall general football fan to actually be drawn to watch these games. And we spoke about this last week and what benefit the league gets from having teams in it. It's definitely getting eyeballs on the league and getting people to realise, you know, there is talent in the Irish football and in the Irish leagues, and Arsenal will do that, certainly. So it might be a difficult task, but any task in the Europa League was going to be difficult for Dundalk. I felt Brian Kerr was a little bit harsh last night on the football show when Dundalk came through, but it did speak a few harsh truths. This Dundalk side probably aren't as good as the 2016 one, so it's going to be it's an uphill battle regardless of who they got.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be fair here, Enda. They got quite lucky in the way the draw fell, because when they lost out to Celje in the Champions League qualifiers, they were going to have to navigate 3 rounds of qualification to get to the Europa League proper. And if you're drawn against teams from Andorra, Moldova, and then the Faroe Islands, given that KI were the worst ranked team left in the competition going into the playoff round, Dundalk, unlike some of the League of Ireland teams like Shamrock Rovers drawing AC Milan, got themselves a slice of luck.
Yeah, definitely. But, I mean, you can look at it 2 ways. You can look at it, Dundalk got a lucky draw and they should have got through that group anyway. Or you can look at it in the sense that, yeah, Dundalk did get a lucky draw and they didn't take it lightly. They got through the group and now they're in the Europa League. So you take the luck as the draw. That's how it goes. I mean, Shamrock Rovers, yeah, they're unlucky to get AC Milan, but also, like, that's just the way these competitions work. I mean, with the teams that are playing in the Europa League right now, Dundalk are going to come up against the Premier League top 6 contenders. So, fair enough, Dundalk got an easy run into it, but they still had to beat those teams, and they did beat those teams. So I don't really buy into the whole negativity around this. I do agree with Brian Kerr in the sense that this Dundalk team's not as good as the 2016 one. Yes, they did get an easy draw, but they did get through that draw, and I think we should be happy that we have an Irish team playing in the biggest competition that we're going to see them in the next couple of years.
And then the rest of Group B, I mean, Arsenal, those 2 games are the ones that stand out. And even though UEFA officially confirmed about 4 hours ago that they're going to allow some supporters to go back into stadiums on the back of the Super Cup between Sevilla and Bayern Munich last week, that they say that maybe 30% capacity could happen but they have the caveat, and they said this last night too, that it's going to be determined by local laws. And given that Dublin is currently in level 3 and a bit, you would imagine that it's fairly unlikely that there'll be enough of a turnaround in Ireland come November for a significant crowd to be able to go to the Aviva Stadium.
I don't want to predict that. Like, I don't want to predict any fans in any football stadiums over the next couple of months, because, like, who knows? There could be fans, there could be not. There might not be fans. I mean, it would be great to have fans there safely and be able to spread them out across the Aviva Stadium and get Irish football fans into football stadiums again. And I think that's what we all want at the end of the day. But you can predict things that are going to come around the corner in a week's time, and you could end up being vastly wrong. So I'd be throwing my neck out to try predict whether or not we're going to have fans.
Right, go on. Try and predict for me then, will Dundalk pick up some points in this group? Because I think the group works out nicely. You've got the 2 Arsenal games, and then they've got Rapid Vienna and Molde of Norway. Realistically, the other 2 teams in the group, if you consider the group that Celtic have got, we'll talk about in a moment, it could have been a lot worse for Dundalk. There's 4 games there where they can target points. I
do think they should be able to pick up points somewhere. I don't think they're going to pick up enough points to get through the group. But they might surprise a few people, depending on what way they set up. I know people sort of have this idealistic view of how Stephen Kenny set up against Zenit and AZ Alkmaar when they were playing against them, but Dundalk were quite practical in all those games, and they did pick up points because they were able to be defensively solid, first of all, and then also transition into attack. So it'll come with the territory depending on how Dundalk's form picks up now under Filippo. I know you have that general manager bounce over the last couple of games, so you have all this positivity. If they can manage to keep that in a jar and bring it out when they really need it, defensively is where Dundalk need to be solid, not going forward. They're probably not going to beat Arsenal. They might struggle to beat those teams, but they can certainly get draws out of these games. And I don't think they're going to be embarrassed against Molde. Maybe Rapid Vienna might have too much, but Molde wouldn't be any danger to many teams in this Europa League. So I don't think Dundalk will embarrass Ireland in this Europa League anyway.
Well, if you've got an itch for some more Dundalk content, Shane Keegan, who was officially on the sheet as their manager last evening because he holds their UEFA licence, their analyst for the opposition, he was on OTB AM this morning. Also on our Off the Ball YouTube currently, you can look back at Filippo Giovagnoli's press conference from last evening, and also the thoughts of Daniel Kelly, who scored that breakaway goal. A guy from Ringsend. Talk about a hero story. His uncle was a steward at the Aviva Stadium last evening, and he was the man who opened the gates for the Dundalk team bus when they were going through yesterday afternoon. Also their captain for the night, Brian Gartland, who had found himself out of the team going into the Champions League qualifier and has got back in favour under Filippo Giovagnoli. And you'll also hear from Darragh Leahy, who today has been named in the Republic of Ireland under-21 squad for their upcoming qualifiers. All those videos are now up on the Off the Ball YouTube page. The rest of the group stages feels like junior search geography when you're working through some of the teams that are playing in the Europa League. But the rest of Dundalk's group, which is Group B, Arsenal, Rapid Vienna and Molde. You've got Tottenham, who are going to be up against Ludogorets of Bulgaria, so a long trip for them there. They've also got Lask of Austria, who played Manchester United in the knockout stages of last year's competition, and Antwerp from Belgium. Leicester are in Group G, which doesn't look too bad. AEK Athens. They've also got Zoria of Ukraine, who were one of the weakest teams in Pot 4, and they'll play the Portuguese side Braga. Celtic, though, have been handed a very tough task. Sparta Prague, AC Milan, who came through in penalties in Portugal last evening, and Lille, while Rangers will play Benfica, Standard Liège and Lech Poznan of Poland. Enda, just to ask you about Celtic's group, I mean, group stages have been particularly mean to them there, where they've got probably the toughest of the third seeds, a difficult fourth seed in Lille. It couldn't have been much more tricky given that Celtic had a good seeding going into that draw. Yeah, and it took a lot of results to make Celtic Pot 1 contenders last night as well. I think 5 results in total across the night went in their favour to make them Pot 1 contenders. So it's as tough of a group as you're going to get as the number 1 seeds going into the group stages. But I mean, last year they had quite a difficult group as well. They went home and away and beat Lazio. So if they can manage to do that again this year, AC Milan aren't as good as people think they are. They're not. They have this reputation because of the great AC Milan's teams of the past, but they're still very much outside of the top 4 in the Serie A when it comes to that. And then you're looking at, say, Sparta Prague. It's going to be a difficult place to go to, but
can Celtic beat them home in Celtic Park? They probably can. And Lille, I do think Lille is a difficult enough game as well. So it'll be a lot for Neil Lennon to get through this, but that's where Celtic need to start improving. And I suppose that's one of the things that people hold up with Neil Lennon over Brendan Rodgers, is that his record is much better in Europe as a Celtic boss than Brendan Rodgers' was. And I was kind of disappointed that Celtic didn't get drawn against Leicester, as they were a lower seed. That would have been a nicer narrative for the Celtic fans out there. But I think it's a group that Celtic can possibly get out of, but it's not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, you can read more about the draw and indeed the Champions League draw, which was made yesterday, on our website. That's otbsports.com. Let's look forward then to the Premier League from this weekend. Emmet O'Keefe and Paddy Power joins us as well. And Emmet, I'm going to ask you to start about the game of the weekend for us in the Premier League. That's Manchester United against Spurs, 4:30 on Sunday. United getting out of jail somewhat last week with a very late VAR decision in their game away to Brighton, while Tottenham were left a little bit frustrated by Newcastle. How do you see Sunday's game going?
I think it's a tricky game to call, especially with Son Heung-min's injury. I think if he had been fit, I would fancy Spurs to cause United problems. I think nothing about United's form so far has been you could be particularly positive about, and with the kind of the tiresome transfer sagas rumbling along in the background, it's kind of it just doesn't seem to be helping. I'm looking forward to see how Gareth Bale potentially plays for Tottenham if he gets a chance. We have him as a 13 to 8 shot to score any time, and I admittedly when he signed for Tottenham, I thought this was possibly not a particularly consequential signing, given that he admitted on a golf podcast a few months ago that he's no ligaments at the outside of both ankles, and his fitness is clearly a significant issue. But it's only 2 years since he scored 16 goals in 26 matches in La Liga, averaging a goal every 112 minutes, which are Sergio Aguero type numbers in England. And I am starting to come around to the idea this is probably a risk we're taking for Spurs, given they're only paying half his wages. And he could be at least a fairly useful impact player for Tottenham, especially with Son out.
Yeah, because Bale is one of your specials at Paddy Power this weekend, Emmet. I think Republic of Ireland supporters, with that Nations League game about to come around between Wales and Ireland, will be wondering whether Bale gets any kind of game time. Tottenham were kind of playing down his chances of playing this weekend, saying that he's nursing a bit of an injury on his knee currently too. If he plays a bit of game time though at Old Trafford, I would imagine he probably plays at the Aviva next week.
I would have thought so too, and it's judging by to be fair to Bale, even when Wales were terrible pre Chris Coleman, he always turned up and gave his absolute best for them. So I would always kind of give him credit for that. And even at Real Madrid, where things were going badly, again he would always show up for Wales and give his all if possible. So yeah, I'd expect him to line up for Wales if at all possible.
And when it comes to this game, Manchester United got out of jail entirely last week. 99 minutes and 40 seconds, I think, were on the clock. The referee's whistle had blown. VAR makes the decision against Maupay to give United a penalty, which saw them win. They didn't play well against Crystal Palace the week before. They rotated so much in the League Cup that it's hard to draw anything from it. What do you make of United after these first 3 competitive games of the season? I
think they've been poor. I think against Brighton last week, they got out of jail. They were absolutely the second best team on the pitch that day. Brighton were much better. I suppose if you look at that game, you're looking at a club and a team that is so clearly defined in what they want to do in Brighton, but they don't have the players to play it to such a high standard. So the likes of, they're hitting the post 5 or 6 times. That wouldn't happen if you're playing with players that are better than what Brighton have at the minute. And then you look at United, who are full of players who are clearly very, very talented, but don't really seem to have a defined way of playing or seem to work as hard as other teams might. And that's probably what has won that game for United at the end of the day. They were managed to stay in the game long enough that the likes of Rashford, the likes of Bruno Fernandes can produce moments of magic like they did to get something out of their games. And that's not going to be good enough for United going forward. They're going to need to improve. And a lot of the talk has been about transfers and bringing in players and centre-backs, and they absolutely, definitely need a centre-back to come in. But I look at United and their work rate, and I see players who do not work nearly as hard enough as most teams in the Premier League, And a lot of people think that work rate can be a little bit of an old-fashioned thing to bring up, but it's a big thing in the Premier League. Liverpool are the best team in the league, and their players work their socks off every single game. Same with Man City when they were at their peak. And the best teams in the world right now press the opposition up high and press them hard. And I just don't see that from United at all. And I don't see the players, maybe they're a little bit groggy, maybe they're not up to full fitness, but I just don't see it so far. And last season, the reason they finished, or the reason they struggled so badly, was because they started slowly. They started badly in the season. And if they start the same way this year, then they're going to find it really hard to get into the top four because the teams around them are better this year.
Emmet, when it comes to the specials for this weekend, one of the ones that you guys have relates back to what I mentioned last week, which was the extremely late penalty that was given for Manchester United at the MX Stadium. Give me the odds then on a penalty being given by VAR beyond the full-time whistle this weekend.
Yeah, so we have it around 9-1 on a penalty to be awarded after the final whistle. And I could see this being kind of an unedifying trend where opposing players are demanding VAR after a late instant in a match. My colleague Jason Murphy did some work on just the kind of the spike in penalties that we've seen this season in the Premier League. And a lot of the kind of the chatter around has been about amending the interpretation of the handball rule. But it's worth noting that there still have been 14 non-handball penalties in 26 matches, which is slightly more than 1 in 2 games. Compared to last season where there would only been 1 non-handball penalty in every 4 matches. I think time will tell whether it's just a slightly random statistic, but I do kind of feel intuitively that it's really never been harder to be a defender with these penalty scenarios where teams are pressing so high up the pitch and leaving their centre halves isolated one-on-one with these pacey forwards in the box, and any touch in the box and then VAR is waiting to give a penalty. So I think that's possibly what we've also seen an increase there as well.
And we'll move on to our second live game on Off the Ball on Newstalk this coming Sunday, which is the 2 p.m. kickoff. Kenny Cunningham, Nathan Murphy on commentary for Arsenal against Sheffield United. 2 teams last season who kind of flirted with the top 4 but couldn't quite get there in the end. Sheffield United tailed off towards the end of the season. They go to the Emirates this coming weekend, and this is a chance for Dundalk fans to maybe scout Arsenal too.
Yeah, because Dundalk fans haven't been watching Arsenal at all over the last couple of years. Sheffield United have been pretty poor since the start of the season. I think teams have sort of figured them out a little bit. Their obvious disadvantage is that they just can't score enough goals. They're one of the lowest scorers in the league last year, regardless of their finish in the table. And that seems to be the issue again this year. They were conceded late against Leeds last week. I watched that entire game and they created maybe 3 to 4 scoring chances. Lundstrom had one very good chance. He just couldn't put it away. But they can't seem to break down the opposition the same way as they were last year. They're not really catching teams on the hop anymore. So that's one of the issues. I know they're in talks with Ryan Brewster now for 23 million. That seems a great bit of business from Liverpool. He showed last year in the Championship that he can score a lot of goals. So it depends if he can transition that into the Premier League. That's obviously a massive increase in the standard of play. So it's going to be tough for
David McGoldrick.
I don't know if it is. I mean, David McGoldrick plays a little bit more of a number 10 kind of role for them. I know he does start up front, but a lot of the time he you could start David McGoldrick wherever you want, but he's going to play that number 10 role for Sheffield United. I think it probably will decrease his amount of game time, but I can't see Ryan Brewster being an automatic starter in that Sheffield side either. They've got Ollie McBurney as well. They've got a couple of experienced Premier League players, so if Ryan Brewster isn't starting, then there's a couple of players that'll come in for him there. But Arsenal again showing up a little against Liverpool, that Liverpool are by far and away the strongest team in the league, but like Arsenal were able to beat them in the cup then during the week. So they're definitely stronger than where they were last year, but are they going to be pushing for the title or pushing for a number 2 spot? I don't think they will be. They will be top 5, top 6 contenders. Probably, if depending on where United and Chelsea, where they pick up their form, Arsenal are probably just a tiny bit better than they were last year, but not massively.
Emmet, Arsenal won't be the first or last team to lose at Anfield this season. It kind of brought a halt to their pretty impressive start to the campaign. At least in terms of the league, can they get back to business this weekend against Sheffield United?
You would think so, but I wouldn't be. I haven't been fully convinced by Arsenal at all, really, so far this season. They were quite fortunate to beat West Ham in their previous home match, and I kind of feel watching them, they almost need 2 Kieran Tierney's in the team, as when they need him to marshal their back three. And then, but when he's playing in the back three, they miss his creativity from the wing back position. I think Maitland-Niles and Bellerin as the two wing backs isn't quite good enough at the really top level to give kind of attacking punch that system requires. But then I think Sheffield United are clearly weaker than last season, which gives them an opportunity. As Enda mentioned, the lack of goals is clearly an issue with them not having scored in their first 3 games. But I think it's a massive blow for them that their centre half Jack O'Connell looks like he's going to be out for the season. O'Connell's one of the best distributing centre backs in the whole Premier League, and he really makes their kind of overlapping centre half systems work because he's so comfortable on the ball. So I think that would certainly give Arsenal an opportunity.
And I didn't think I'd be saying high-flying Everton introducing into a fixture, but Everton have been pretty flawless so far. They're banging in goals, they're playing some nice football, and their good run and start to the season should probably continue against Brighton at Goodison Park tomorrow. Yeah,
they've been silky to watch is the word I would use, and that comes with the territory of James Rodriguez playing in midfield. I think Everton, if you look at them on face value, you have to give them credit because they identified where they were weakest and they bought really well to bring in those players. And Alan, I think, will be one of those players that gets a lot of plaudits over the next couple of months and over the course of the season for the unseen work that he does. That he really is what makes James Rodriguez tick and allows the team to sort of play a bit more dynamic than they were last year. And I thought the James Rodriguez signing was an interesting one because it was always going to go one or two ways. It was going to be that either James Rodriguez wasn't what we thought he was when he first signed for Real Madrid, and he's just one of these overrated players that ended up at Everton, which could well have happened, or he's going to show what he can do, and so far he's shown what he can do. He's been phenomenal. And Calvert Lewin, I mean, how many times have we spoken about him being hot or cold, but he's absolutely flying. If Carlo Ancelotti can turn him into Inzaghi, then that is one of the biggest transformations of the Premier League ever. I'm not being hyperbolic about that. To turn Calvert Lewin into Inzaghi would be an achievement to behold from Ancelotti.
Well, if he does blow hot and cold from time to time, he's hotter than the surface of the sun currently. 2 hat-tricks in the first month of the season. He's got himself a little bit of a head start in the race for the Golden Boot. Emmet, how are Paddy Power looking at the market? Is Dominic Calvert-Lewin a genuine contender now with yourselves to try and win that Golden Boot?
Yeah, absolutely. Having started the season at 66-1 to be top scorer, Calvert-Lewin in now is short of 17-2 with just over 8-1, and he's certainly one of the favourites. As you guys could have alluded to, before the season, I would have been pretty sceptical that Calvert-Lewin could ever be the kind of the top class striker that Everton really need in terms of the polish and his link-up play and his finishing. But and like I would need probably more of a 5-game sample size of Premier League and domestic cup games to convince me. But I think one thing we can say with certainty is he's going to get far more chances this season than last if James Rodriguez keeps playing like he is. His range of passing is truly sensational, and Ancelotti, and as Enda said, Ancelotti's really kind of built a team that complements his strengths with Alan and Doucouré's running power, complementing James's kind of economy of movement, shall we say.
Emmet, I'll give you a first shout on the tea time game tomorrow. It's Leeds against Man City. Leeds have impressed a lot of people in their first few games back in the top flight, and if we're realistic, Man City were humbled last Sunday evening against Leicester.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting game. Obviously, the Bielsa Guardiola connection is an obvious one. And just watching Man City recently, I think we're really seeing how much of an important player Fernandinho was to them. And since he's gotten older, moving back to centre half, I think Rodri just simply doesn't have his ability to put out fires and start attacks like the Brazilian. Between Laporte, Nathan Ake and Ruben Diaz, new signing Ruben Diaz, City might be okay at centre half this year, but against the space in front of the centre half, it'll be the bigger issue as the season goes on. I think it's really going to be fascinating to see how City go about breaking down the Leeds press. Leeds unsurprisingly lead the Premier League in tackles made, and I wouldn't expect to see any kind of change in approach from Bielsa. It's hard to see past kind of a really high scoring, entertaining game here.
Yeah, jumping around the fixtures, and tomorrow's lunchtime game is Chelsea, who dug themselves out of a big hole last Saturday night when they were in a pretty perilous position against West Brom. They go up against a Crystal Palace team who I'd imagine go to Stamford Bridge is a free hit for this West against South London encounter, given that Palace have already won at Old Trafford this season.
Yeah, Palace go into these games full of confidence, and they're actually quite good away from home. It's one of the strange ones for mid-table sides. They're usually really good at home and poor away, but Palace are almost better away than they are at home. And again, they will be looking at this game thinking Wilfried Zaha, maybe shift him onto the right and give him a run out against either Marcus Alonso or Ben Chilwell. Ben Chilwell played during the week. He didn't play the full game though, so I'm not really sure if he's fully fit for this sort of fixture. So if it's Marcus Alonso, shift Zaha onto the right hand side and burn him up, because he has no pace left in his legs. Thiago Silva, sloppy in his first game for Chelsea last week, and he has no pace either. So that Palace side has quite a bit of pace going forward with Zaha and Andros Townsend. And even Ayew as well has a little bit of pace in his legs still, but he's more of a positioning striker than anything else. But Palace do have players that can do damage to that Chelsea team. But also, if Chelsea turn up like they did in the second half of that West Brom game, then they should have too much firepower in their system to beat Crystal Palace. But, you never know. Again, this Chelsea team, everyone expected them to come out and be phenomenal to begin with. That's just not how it works when you bring in 7-8 players to come into your starting lineup. But what I'm looking forward to is seeing if Crystal Palace do win, if Frank Lampard has a go at Roy Hodgson, because he is a bad loser.
Just a few of the games to have a look at. Emmet, Leicester, so impressive last week, went through Man City's midfield for fun and got in behind multiple times to inflict a huge defeat on the Premier League champions from 2 seasons ago. Leicester go up against a West Ham team who've been having plenty of problems so far this season.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I was pretty concerned for Leicester with Wilfred Ndidi being out for 12 weeks, and he's such an important player for them last season, and they really suffered when he was out. But if Nampalys Mendy plays like he did against City, then he won't be too badly missed. Him and Yuri Tielemans are absolutely superb. And with the additions of Castagna from Atalanta, Cengiz Under from Roma, and the centre-half Wesley Fofana from Saint Etienne, it looks like Leicester are pretty well set up for another tilt to top 4. If Jamie Vardy keeps playing like he is, I think they'll be hard to stop. And I think even though West Ham were impressive against Wolves, I think it's hard to see past the Leicester victory here.
Yeah, last man standing this weekend. I've pushed all in on Wolves winning at Molineux against Fulham. Not even so much about the way that Wolves are playing Enda, Coll, but just given that Fulham are so poor defensively and they've looked really bad in the first few games. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know what Fulham expected. I know Tony Khan was tweeting furiously after the game last week, and well, that's highly unprofessional as we all know. But also, they went into this Premier League with 3 of the 4 defenders that played in the Premier League last time, and they were the worst defence in the league. I just don't know what Scott Parker expected. I know in the build-up to this season, Scott Parker spoke a lot about trusting the players that got him into the Premier League, but that's just not the way that you go about business when you get up into the Premier League. You need to bring in the quality that you know is good enough to keep you there, and Fulham didn't do that. I know there's a couple of teams that got burned over the last couple of years that built a lot of players into their squad after they got up, but you do have to add a little bit of quality that's going to help you stay up in the Premier League, and Fulham haven't done that. They've been torn apart by every team, and they're just not good enough to stay in the Premier League. It's simple as that. I don't think Scott Parker's job is on the line by any means, but I do think they're easily contenders to go down, and depending on what Wolves, I know Wolves were poor last week, but Wolves should demolish the side if they actually turn up to the game.
Well, if not, I'm out of last man standing on week 3. In terms of the other games, 2 more to look at. Emmet, Newcastle against Burnley. Jeff Hendrick up against his former employers tomorrow night.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't expect, if you're going to give one game a miss this weekend, it would be this one. I wouldn't be expecting too many goals or too much flair. I think I'd be worried actually about Burnley this season. I think they don't seem to have signed anybody, and Sean Dyche has worked miracles in the past, but with the likes of Jack Cork, Ben Mee, Jay Rodriguez, Ashley Barnes, and James Tarkowski, but all but absent recently. I think it's been pretty tough. I think I'd expect a kind of a dour 0-0 or 1-0 win for Newcastle maybe here.
Okay, well, with players heading off to their international squads on Sunday, it means that Sunday is packed. There is a late fixture this coming Sunday, which is Aston Villa and up against the current Premier League champions, Liverpool. Liverpool switched around quite a bit for the EFL Cup this week, where they were knocked out by Arsenal, but they beat Arsenal at Anfield to continue their great start to the Premier League season last weekend. Are they going to win at Villa Park this coming Sunday night?
Yeah. They are. Of course they are. I mean, Aston Villa have added again to their squad. I think Aston Villa have actually added quite well this year, to be fair to them. I mean, Ross Barkley, I know he's not good enough for a Chelsea squad, but he's certainly good enough to start in that Aston Villa squad. So I think he's found his level now, and Aston Villa can fire on. They have brought in some transfers this year. So I'm not sure Aston Villa are absolute guarantees to go down this year, but in this game you can guarantee one thing, and it's going to be Liverpool are going to win this game. So I can't wait to clip this and put it out after Aston Villa shock Liverpool by winning 2-1 and a penalty after the final whistle.
Aston Villa should have won that fixture last season. It took 2 very late goals and Sadio Mane's heroics very late on.
Almost never won the race, Will. Almost never won the race. That's the important thing.
It was the result of champions last year when Liverpool just basically laid siege to the Villa goal in the last 5 minutes. My thanks to both Emmet and Enda for joining us on the Paddy Power half hour on this Friday. Don't forget our live games coming up on Off the Ball this Sunday. 2 o'clock is Arsenal against Sheffield United with Nathan and Kenny Cunningham. Stephen Doyle will be joined by Brian Kerr for the game at 4:30 from Old Trafford. It's Manchester United against Tottenham. If you're having a bet, best of luck this weekend, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. Minimal contact in stadiums shouldn't stop the usual suspects from going down. Gamble responsibly. CWE.net.